Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Kill for Love by Laura Picklesimer. Narrated by Stefanie Kay. 1. Every night I dreamed of fire. I watched as Santa Monica descended into flames. Blocks of designer merchandise torched to the ground, windows shattered, and mannequins melted onto their steel pedestals. It was one spectacular disaster each night. The flames always swept east, immolating strolling shoppers and Lululemon moms, toppling over palm trees. Clouds of smoke sent wheezing men in suits to the ground. Closer to the flaming epicenter, hair extensions ignited like wicks of dynamite up women's backs, and silicone implants exploded out of their mesh sports bras with wet pops. The fire gained momentum once it reached Brentwood, moving on to destroy the rest of the storefronts and organic cafes in its way. I could feel the heat lick at me, but I was always safe from the fire's reach. After its fury was spent, the flames would eventually calm, and bodies would litter the street like charred anorexics, still smoking. Then I'd wake up alone in my four-poster bed, my skin burning. It was the September heat wave that hit every fall across Los Angeles. While the basic bitches in other parts of the country sucked up pumpkin spice lattes, LA got one more lethal hit of summer. Temperatures climbed, and the central air conditioning in the Delta Gamma sorority house ran nonstop, but it was never enough to keep the heat from pressing in. I'd wake each morning in a chilled sweat that would quickly sour. After a cold shower, I'd head downstairs for a breakfast of ice cubes. I'd dash salt on them to feel a pucker of flavor before braving a hairdryer on my scalp. Earlier in the summer, I'd been able to follow the entirety of my morning routine alone, in peace. But now the sorority was back for the new school year. Classes had started last week, which meant 20 girls were crammed into an 8-room Victorian mansion. In teen comedies, sorority living was a wet dream of pillow fights and towel-clad bimbos. The reality was that girls were disgusting. Living in the DG house involved stray hairs of every length, texture, and color filling the sinks and showers, blooming red tampons spilled out of Target trash cans, and watered-down Starbucks drinks sweat across every spare surface. The last week of September, I woke up to 2 DMs. An RSVP reminder for a refugee cupcake drive in the quad, and a photo of the deep V-cut of some boy's abs. His boxers hung so low I could see the wiry growth peeking from underneath. I deleted both messages. Camilla, DG president and bane of my existence, stopped by my room with a white poster board before I even had a chance to get dressed. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked. "It's a vision board for the new school year. Fill it out with visual representations of your goals and other aspirations." I had seen hers. I wasn't sure what kind of life goals a bunch of fluffy accent rugs and wellness smoothies signified. "This sort of bullshit is for the pludges," I said. "I'm a 5th year." "I wouldn't be proud of that distinction," Camilla said, and finally buzzed off. Fall rush had just ended, the time when sororities hosted a slaughter of social mixers, recruiting for the upcoming school year. It had once been the highlight of the season. I used to revel in the chance to disassemble every potential new member, relentlessly break down each girl's deficiencies in the group chats. This year, I had skipped recruitment and gone to Cabo with a group of girls who were also graduating soon and didn't give a flying fuck about protocol anymore. After 5 years at the sorority, I couldn't stomach another afternoon sorting through girls in knockoff Louis Vuittons and cheap skater dresses, or smiling at the eager faces of pledges. At least most of the house would be gone today now that classes had begun. I entered the shared bathroom, and the air was still heavy with fruity body wash. Mandy and Amy, fellow fifth years, were shaving their legs over the sink. "Dan says you can't get herpes from giving head," Mandy says. "Dan's a fucking liar. That's why I stick with chicks," Amy said. "Most of the time." We had spent the last 4 years living under the same roof, and yet Mandy and Amy weren't my friends. I didn't even like them. I'd graduate, unfollow the two on social media, and never think about them again. "Want to go to the rec center later, Tiffany?" Mandy asked me as I dried my hands and snatched somebody's bottle of Gucci Guilty from the bathroom counter. "I have some pretty important errands to run today," I said. I structured my weekdays around 4 important categories: fitness, self-care, shopping, and socials. It was harder than it looked. I often found myself in my Mercedes, winding down random streets. It was so easy to get lost. One extra turn off the main thoroughfare, and I'd dead end at a deserted park or ugly stucco apartment complex facing yellowed lawns. Today, I took the Mercedes west toward the mansions above San Vicente Boulevard, passing clipped grass and gardener trucks. A street I had never heard of before dumped me out near the ocean, over the cliffs of the Pacific Palisades. I parked near the 3rd Street Promenade and walked past misters and fountains, moms and their little brats. The stores were too low-end, and I found nothing. Those were the worst days. I settled for a manicure, even though I had just had one 3 days before. "Strip them," I instructed the nail technician. "What color?" I looked over the samples, the several dozen keychains of replicated matching oval nails, and thought of a Technicolor corpse. I settled on the color I was already wearing. Pink, but a shade darker. A slight neon over the cotton candy of the old coat. I had her file my nails at an even sharper angle. I needed an escape from the heat, so I checked the movie times. It was a novelty, but I wanted a distraction. Romantic comedies were my preferred film genre. There was such a clear ride of emotions. I could let my mind wander and still clearly register each character's emotional trajectory, even if I couldn't feel those things in myself most of the time. I settled on Will You Be Mine, featuring Ben Affleck as a mining tycoon working somewhere in South America during the 1950s. Jennifer Lopez played his sassy secretary, who was thinking of a new career as a cabaret singer. She was just about to quit when the evil head of a rival mining company plotted to leave the two for dead in the wilderness. When they were first ditched in the rainforest together, they hated each other. But after an unrelated mining disaster allowed Ben to rescue Jen from a random band of rabid tree monkeys, they fell in love and got married at a conga lounge. The movie contained all the expected beats, but as I was walking back to my car, the dry heat of another 95-degree day bearing down on me, I could only think about how fucking old Ben Affleck was starting to look. It ate at me on the drive home. I had forgotten it was rush hour. I crawled along Wilshire, inching slowly behind the backlog of cars waiting to enter the 405 freeway. I heard screaming. 2 guys about my age, with the bloated body types of croissants, were waving from the sidewalk, trying to flag me down. I met their gaze, and one of them barked, "Show me your tits!" When I didn't react, they began miming, pointing. I thought briefly of what it would feel like to swerve to the right and plow into them. I thought about how far their bodies might fly, if their barreled guts might explode. The fantasy was shattered by a loud, low honk from the Prius behind me. The light had turned green. I rolled up the 5 feet that traffic had moved and saluted my middle finger to the driver. When I finally returned to the sorority house, I found my roommate, Emily, home from her classes and plowing through a bag of Milano cookies. "Hey, Tiffany," she said, and tried to wipe away the crumbs she had dropped on her bed. Emily was a second year and nowhere near Delta Gamma material. She wore her hair in frizzy curls and refused to pluck her eyebrows. Her style was bold in a bad way, uncoordinated, baggy, in overly optimistic colors. She looked like the type who hunted for bargains at thrift stores. We had brought her in last spring to raise the collective GPA of our house. It wasn't so bad rooming with her, though. Emily's grandmother lived in a shitty neighborhood south of Pico Boulevard, so she left every weekend. I threw myself on the bed. I need a shower. Emily offered a cookie, and I shook my head. You know I don't eat processed food, I said. I sat up and stared at the mirror, angling myself for a selfie. You don't look like this on a diet of simple carbs. My empty stomach made a gurgle in agreement. Skipping meals can cause you to overeat in the long run, Emily said. How do you know that? I asked. I read it. What, like in a newspaper? Get your facts the normal way, I said. I scrolled through my phone, looking for that rare fitness influencer who had sharper ab cracks than me, trying to block out both Emily and my hunger pains. By nightfall, the entire chapter had crammed into the living room to watch The Real Housewives, Retribution, a long-anticipated special that pitted the OG of every major Housewives franchise against one another in a dating competition. If you wanted to see desperation and fury, watch middle-aged women fight it out for the same soft 50-something real estate developer. The competition began with a recap of the long-standing feuds across all cities. I had hoped the on-screen drama would substitute for my disappointing shopping run, but I couldn't get enough of a rise from the shouting matches, the occasional shattered glass. I wanted spilled blood, not wine. Something more violent from the divorcees, but it never came. The climax of the episode arrived when a loudmouth from New Jersey ripped out a Dallas housewife's hair extensions. The Texan shoved the woman's head into a giant punch bowl of Sunset Sangria, the sponsored drink for the night. The catfight ended as quickly as it had begun, when a New York housewife revealed her ex-husband was being sent to prison for tax evasion. Suddenly, there were tears and slurred apologies, and then a shampoo commercial came on. I had one of the couches to myself and was applying La Mer self-tanning moisturizer to my forearms. You're so tan, Mandy remarked. I looked down at my arms, the smooth inward curve my biceps made as it met my elbow. I grabbed my phone and snapped a shot of my body, making sure the product label could be seen in the background. I'd post later when the number of likes would be higher. So, who's going to the black and white party next week? Show of hands? Amy asked. Camilla said, I've said it before. I seriously think we need to rebrand. It just doesn't feel very sensitive. Camilla was the type of goody-goody who even the teachers wanted to punch in high school. When she wasn't taking semesters off to try to save leukemic babies, she was usually sticking her nose in my business, informing me that I was late for meetings or short on volunteer hours, as if I was expected to follow the same rules as the other girls. The black and white party refers to the most iconic duet of colors in a style wardrobe, I explained. It's a classic party theme, and it's not going anywhere. I'm just thinking about optics, Camilla said as the show spotlighted an Orange County housewife who had gotten her upper lip sewn to her nose in a freak plastic surgery accident. Tiffany, what season was your mom on the OC show? A recruit named Julie interrupted. Most Delta Gams knew to avoid mention of Pam and her brief stint on the show. She was a friend of, not a cast member, and that was over 4 years ago. Pam had never even told me about it. I had found out freshman year when I suddenly caught sight of the marble staircase and backyard of our estate and realized that the feng shui wine cooler party was taking place at my house. Pam had come in hot, immediately accusing one of the show headliners of taking a bite of her Pomeranian's custom birthday cake. But she was always too self-aware, too insecure. There were shots of her checking mirrors, primping her hair, looking into the cameras out of the corner of her eye. And she was incapable of committing the appropriate level of backstabbing. My phone vibrated, and I looked down to see a text from Tristan, my date to the black and white party. He was shirtless, flexing his biceps in a bathroom mirror, ratty towels visible behind him. His text read, "Sneak peek." I slipped into the downstairs bathroom and pulled out the small bottle of Gucci I had nabbed earlier. I sprayed the air and took a long breath. I fixed my eyes on the curves of the perfume bottle and anchored myself back through the momentary high of mandarin and patchouli. Tomorrow, I'd go shopping and buy something extra expensive. Still, my body itched with a strange dissatisfaction. It reminded me of the low, grating hum the electrical wires made when the Santa Anas came in. The static white noise that filled the air right before they exploded onto unsuspecting streets. 2. My nightmares continued. The fire spread to WeHo. I would wake up in the middle of the night to a gnawing sensation in my gut and wonder if I'd somehow forgotten a hair conditioning appointment or a wellness session with my life coach. On Tuesday, I missed a morning fitness class at Elite Elegance, a Beverly Hills workout studio that combined belly dancing, yoga, and trapeze work performed with an aerial hammock. Instead, I had to settle for a standard Spinlates session all the way over on Fairfax Avenue, the type of simplified, modifications-heavy class that attracted still tubby new moms and the over 40 set. Out shopping, the new outfit I wanted for the black and white party on Thursday failed to materialize, and I returned to my Mercedes with just a pair of Louboutin heels and a Prada clutch. I felt dejected driving back into Westwood with only a couple of accessories. "I need you to record me," I told Emily when I returned to my room. Maybe playing back my figure, watching the likes stack up, would brighten my difficult day. "Make it look spontaneous," I instructed her as I pivoted and blew a kiss. Emily's appreciative gaze would help soothe my nerves. The assurances mother gave their daughters that those blondes in the magazines had been photoshopped into impossible sizes, or that Barbies couldn't anatomically exist because women couldn't support that hip-to-waist ratio. Those were lies. I could prove it. I paired the Louboutins with a white strapless cocktail dress embellished in black. It was a month old, but I hadn't worn it in public yet. I hoped that Emily's hungry gaze over my curves would be enough to boost my spirits, get me excited for another weekend of the typical drinking and slutting. "You look amazing," Emily said, handing back my iPhone. I'd post the video across 3 platforms and get at least a few thousand views in the next half hour. I grabbed the white clutch and held it against my outfit. "I'm going to wear this combination to the party. What do you think?" "That'll be perfect. Who are you going with?" Emily asked. "Tristan." "Tiffany and Tristan. That's cute." "Sure," I said. Other than being about 95% certain I had slept with him once during freshman orientation, I didn't know much about the dude. I didn't bother asking Emily about her date. She wouldn't be going. The prude didn't even drink. I had picked up a bakery item on the way home, a donut-type pastry with an explosion of confetti and pastel frosting. I carefully untied the twine around the box and slid it open, careful not to disrupt the decorative collage inside. After I had taken it to the spot in the hall with the best natural light, I shot a dozen photos from different angles and then smashed the thing in the trash. I went to the kitchen and grilled up some soy blocks, cutting them into tiny fourths and counting to 10 between each bite. I looked at my watch. It was only 4 p.m. In the common room, Mandy and Amy were sorting through a pile of fashion and style magazines. The sorority had a mail subscription to all the major publications that had never been canceled over the decades. I usually joined them at the beginning of each month. We liked to pore through the magazines and rip out advertisements for must-have products or fashion items, stopping occasionally if an intriguing title like 25 Naughty Uses for a Q-Tip caught our eye. We'd wait until we accumulated a fair number of ads and then order everything on our iPhones, sending a customized tally of our transactions to one another. Amy looked up from her Cosmo. Did you know that 57% of 5,000 men polled would rather undergo brain surgery than submit to anal penetration during foreplay? Not Dan, said Mandy. He loves it. I grabbed an issue of Allure and flipped through it. I had at least 10 products from every major designer listed in the thing. I felt a sudden weightlessness, like when you're slipping off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by the certainty that you're free-falling, that nothing around you is real. I realized that I'd be sitting on this couch again next month, when the winter issues were mailed, and I'd have every single item in those magazines, too. And I'd still have time left over because a 2-hour workout and a 4-store shopping spree weren't enough to fill up an entire day. My hunger was back, and I wouldn't eat again for hours. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number, this time a 323 area code. I opened it, and a curved cock filled the frame of my screen. I threw my phone down and felt for my throat, finding the pearl drop necklace I'd worn every day since I was 17. My life coach called it my force center and encouraged me to touch it and count backward with slow, steady breaths anytime I felt alone or anxious. I usually didn't need to be calmed. I liked being alone, and I was rarely anxious. I felt numb most days, unsurprised, bored. Today, though, was different. I resisted the urge to put the necklace in my mouth and feel the smooth pearl against my tongue. When I returned to my room, Emily was eating from a tray of celery and carrots. She smiled and held it out, proud of herself. Nice try, I told her, but that ranch dressing contains more saturated fat than a cheeseburger. I grabbed a pile of celery sticks and fell back on my bed. I began snapping them in two. Have you ever had an existential crisis? I asked her. Would all of middle school count? No. Being awkward and unpopular isn't what I'm talking about. I'm referring to real problems. Do you ever feel like you're not acting like your true self? No. The vision board Camilla had dropped off was still blank white, propped against my bedroom wall. I mean, is there more that you wish you were doing than just living in the sorority house? I asked. Of course. I've always wanted to visit Cambodia, and I dream all the time about finishing med school, maybe starting my own clinic. What would happen when I was forced to finally graduate? I'd live alone, that was for sure. No more roommates. As relieved as I would be to no longer sync my menstrual cycles with a dozen other girls, I wondered what I'd do with my time every day. People got jobs, I supposed, but wage earning wasn't exactly my vibe. Seriously? That's it? I said. Well, what do you want? Emily asked. I didn't have an answer. The soy blocks had failed to fill me, and I was already feeling the familiar pangs of hunger again. I scrolled through my phone, past the hearts and likes and confirmation emails from the day's purchases. I looked through my photo library of sunsets and tiki drinks, uneaten buffet feasts, hollowed stomachs, that perfect triangle of emptiness between my inner thighs and the sky. I stroked the soft leather of the Prada purse I had bought that day and thought about the carcass it had been peeled from. I want everything. 3. On Thursday, I wrapped up my daily activities early, giving myself 2 hours for makeup contouring and hair. Tristan was picking me up at 10. Thursday was the night of the week that the frats hosted their biggest parties, and everyone got the most wrecked. We'd spend the remaining weekend in recovery mode. As I got ready, I thought briefly about canceling. I'd barely slept the night before. Tristan wasn't worth all this primping and plucking. I wondered if any guy I had slept with was. The alternative, though, was sitting in bed for the night, trying not to sabotage my diet on Emily's arsenal of junk food. Tristan arrived in a Corvette, which was pretty annoying since it practically skimmed the ground. My legs sprawled out under me, and I could tell my dress was starting to wrinkle on the drive to the party. I caught a glimpse of Tristan's outfit. He had chosen the exact same color distribution that I had, a solid white base with accents of black. We looked way too matchy-matchy, especially since our hair was pretty much the same shade of blonde. I entered the party with him, praying that no one would think we had coordinated. The party was typical, held at a rented space about a mile from Greek Row. A cheap wooden stand served as the open bar, stacked with mid-range liquors, and the dance floor was already inundated with a bunch of Sigma news. About a half hour into the party, a dozen Delta Gammas stumbled in. My house had pre-partied heavily. I usually laid off the alcohol because it made no sense to spend the day limiting my intake to 800 calories and then go ruin it with a bunch of cheap frozen margaritas. An hour into the party, I had downed only a vodka and Diet Coke. Tristan was pretty drunk. I pulled him away from his frat brothers, and he took it as a come-on. He slid his hand from the small of my back over my ass and kept his hand huddled there like a moron. Then I had a sudden vision of Tristan screaming. The image was brief, a guttural yell, equal parts pain and satisfaction. I felt a burning urgency, like a shot of Bacardi 151 fanning out through my system. I suddenly knew that tonight, something worthwhile was going to happen, and I would be in control every step of the way. "Do you want to ditch the party and go back to the frat house?" I asked. "We just got here," Tristan said. He grabbed my wrist and leaned closer. "There's a back room that we could use." He pointed off the dance floor to a small lounge area. A girl was puking into a trash barrel nearby. "I want to go back to your place," I said, twisting away from his grasp. "Let's stay here," he said. I went ahead and revealed the plan half solidified in my head. "I'm interested in exploring more deviant forms of sexual expression tonight. I think a private room would be best." He looked at me for a second. "I'll get the car." "You don't need to tell anyone else we're leaving," I said, and pulled him toward the exit. "You good to drive?" "It's only a few miles away," he said. On the car ride, my stomach tightened, intestines knotted. I had eaten only a veggie cauliflower rice bowl and some kale chips that afternoon, which put me at about 600 calories for the day. I clutched my abdomen as hunger pains sliced through me. Reaching for my phone out of habit, I counted the views from the videos I had taken at the party. Then I turned it off. I stared at the dark of my eyes reflected in its blank screen. "Do you have any gum?" I asked Tristan. "Look in the passenger side door. I'll take one." I pulled out a pack of peppermint Trident and popped 3 pieces in my mouth, then gave one to Tristan. I chewed for the entire car ride over, but the gum only further roused my appetite. I swallowed it when we got inside. The smell of the frat house was welcome after a long summer at the sorority. The stifling sense of competing perfumes, all too fruity and candied. Here there were notes of piss and beer, a trace of vomit, and the overriding ripeness of fresh boy. Tristan's room was on the top floor of the empty frat house, away from the main hall. The space was bigger than I remembered. Next to his bed were a small wet bar, a table, and chairs. I sat down at the table and motioned for him to do the same. He was reluctant. "Why don't we relax on the bed?" he asked. "These chairs are pretty uncomfortable." "Sit here first," I insisted. Tristan approached the bar and poured a shot of Jack Daniels. "You want something? I've got Malibu," he said. I liked to set up a bottle of Malibu behind me when posing for selfies. It always lent a carefree, Californian mood to the occasion. But I never actually drank.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?